now that we're on the subject of it, Keri, let's talk a little bit about your history. Because like you said, you lived in this area for a long time. Tell us what you used to do and how you got to the place you are now.
I worked in entertainment, actually. I picked up woke. Back then we called it social justice. I picked it up in college in the late 90s and took it into my career. So I managed comedians and I helped them sell television projects and concert films and books. And the last show, I produced a show called Totally Biased with W. Kamau Bell on FX with Chris Rock was another one of our executive producers. And that show was thoroughly woke. And at the time, I really believed in it. That's why I know there are a lot of people in it with good. I know there are people in it who are just you could call it brainwashing, or who are just severely misguided and not awake. And
who think they're doing the right thing.
Think they're doing the right thing because the way it's presented, and especially if you get to people at a young age, I didn't pick it up until university, but today kids are learning this new religion, whatever we call it. Some people call it identity Marxism, neo-Marxism, you call it Maoism. It's woke, social justice, all these different words we have for it. Kids are learning it at a much younger age now. And I think that because of the way you learn it, it's not like they sit you down and say, I'm going to teach you this mutated form of Marxism or Maoism. It's not like that at all. It's presented as a way to end racism and sexism, and it's presented as part of as if it's liberalism and progressive, and it's not. It's actually illiberal. It's, as you guys, it's about censorship. It's about honestly, it took me a long time to see, but in some ways, it's about supporting violence. Suppression of ideas that you don't like with violence and with force. And that's not liberal at all. And so it took me 2 decades in it of believing I was doing something good. The comedians I tended to work with, I chose to work with comics for the most part who talked about these issues, who pushed this ideology in their work. And I thought I was doing something good to change the world for better, in my little corner of the universe.
I recommend everyone to go to your channel because, like I said, I've been there and watched a lot of your videos already, and I think you are a very clear thinker. And
thank you. I wasn't always.
No, but I would say I was lucky per se in that my parents escaped from communist Hungary. So I saw this around me when I was in university, and it didn't infect me at all. In fact, I went we had the Stalinists when I went to university in the 70s, Stalinist apologists, and they were horrible. And so to me, I've been arguing against this because my parents lived it.
See, I think that's so interesting because when I interview people about it, I try to if there's someone who was never infected by it or pushing it, and I want to know why. And a lot of people are like you. They had families who came from a communist background, and so they had seen something similar.
Yep. Everyone is equal. Everyone in Hungary had to buy iron Soviet bloc cars, except for the apparatchiks. They got the black Mercedes. So
and again, that's why it's more Marxist than anything else. But
yeah. So I gotta ask. The behind the sorry to interrupt you, Keri. Keep going. This is great.
I was gonna say I gotta ask, Keri. So what exactly led you to the point where you finally realized that this wasn't right or something was wrong about this? What got you there?
I think there have been several sort of inflection points where it's ramped up. And one of those was in 2016 during the presidential election. And it became more culturally dominant. Suddenly you have presidential candidates using a word like implicit bias, which was a word we had used in the social justice or woke world, but I had never seen someone mainstream talking about that. But bigger than that, I saw some of the things that I thought were bugs, not features. I started to see those. Like I went down a rabbit hole of videos on YouTube of people on the left attacking and assaulting Trump supporters at Trump rallies. And I didn't know that was happening. And that affected me emotionally because I was like, these people are on my side, right? And they're throwing bricks at people and chasing them down. And so that startled me. And there were a few things like that. There was the shooting that happened in Texas and Dallas at the Black Lives Matter rally where a sniper killed a lot of police officers. But it was more the way my woke echo chamber responded to that really startled me, because they were sort of tongue in cheek, like it's making jokes about it. Well, you know, some old white men might have to die. And that was shocking to me. Wow. And so then when Trump won, I'll try and make it very brief, but I had started to question certain things, but I was still you don't leave a cult overnight. And I was shocked he won. I was one of those people crying. You can laugh at me.
No, but no.
I didn't know why. And I was trying to figure out why he won, because I really wanted to make sure he didn't win again. Not knowing a mere 4 years later, I would end up voting for him. But at that time, I was like, no, we have to do everything we can to figure out why this happened. And so I started reading things I'd never read before, getting outside of my echo chamber, watching commentators who I had never watched but had opinions about, and started to realize it wasn't exactly what I thought it was that was happening. And my world reacted very negatively to that, like almost like a cult would.
That's the second time you've used that word. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead and get into that a little bit.
Well, you're not able to think
it was a cult.
Because you're not supposed to ask questions in a cult. In a cult, there are several characteristics. Woke, I think, fits a lot of them. It doesn't have a charismatic leader. Like there's no David Koresh-like figure or something. So people have trouble seeing it as a cult. But a lot of the other characteristics where you can't ask questions, you don't question dogma, you are encouraged to cut off contact with friends and family if they're not believers.
Sounds like Est.
Like what?
Est, Eberhard seminar training back in my day. About that. Yeah, I'll tell you all about it.
But yeah, a lot of these cults have similar things. They're also very concerned with language and controlling language. They come up with new phrases, new words, new definitions, and woke does that. And when I started thinking back to, like, you know, some of the first things that happened to me when I sort of fell into this belief system without realizing I was doing so, was that it changed a lot of definitions for me. So I learned in 96 or something, I learned, oh no, racism is not what you think it is. It's not thinking that people are inferior or superior because of their race and judging them and treating them differently because of their race. It's not that. Racism is prejudice plus power. So they rewire your thinking, and they say the same thing about sexism, right? It's prejudice plus power. So they are taking these well-intentioned young people and then telling them, hey, we're rewiring you almost, basically, so that now you believe it's impossible to be sexist towards people who of a certain sex or racist towards people of a certain race. And they get you to really change the way you think about things by changing words. Cults do that. So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling now, but yeah,
it's just interesting to hear, because you use that terminology, and I mean, we've seen a lot of this stuff in action, and you know, I don't come from the same place as you, Keri, but I was also somebody who's more of a centrist. You know, most of my life I've pretty much voted Democrat, or whatever you want to put it. Like, I always thought I was doing the right thing, being more social, like taking care of people. You know, I want to take care of old people. I think the less fortunate should be taken care of. I'm worried about kids, you know, like I want people to be, you know, feel safe in America. That's all good and well. But like you, I did kind of see a lot of the same things. So it is kind of, and I think your journey parallels a lot of people in that respect.
A lot of
where
people,
they've seen the left leave them and go ahead.
Well, a lot of people, like you said, in the past few years, I think because it has ramped up so much that it's in all of the entertainment now. That's why there's these cultural commentary shows talking about it so much. It's everywhere now. It wasn't like that in the 90s. And now it's so culturally dominant and it's doubled down so much that there are a lot of people waking up to it who are leaving it because it's not what we thought it was. And I couldn't see before. I couldn't see the ways in which it was illiberal. And I couldn't see the ways in which it was causing me to turn off my thinking. You know, I was going through the motions of what they do. It's sort of like this. They're not thinking when they have a conversation with you. They're sorting through a filing cabinet in their head of all the phrases and the mantras and the things they're supposed to say. and they're searching for the right one to throw back at you.
And you can't have a discussion with them. Yeah. It's a lost cause. They're not going to convince you or me, and I'm not going to convince them. And we both have different definitions for the same word. And so it's a completely lost thing. And the irony in all of this is what I was talking about with equity, is that this equity part, which they want to take over, ironically, they're only interested in the cream of the crop stuff. They want actors, board members. None of them are talking about that building that's filled with bricklayers and going, oh no, we want equity with all those men laying bricks. Oh, we want equity in the coal mines.
No, they never talk about how there's not enough women in
correct
shoveling.
So the equity is only in the fancy pants jobs.
And I'm sure there's a job for that in San Francisco.
There's a lot of things in common with
STEM. They want STEM.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things in common with like cults or in religious sects like Scientology, right? It's those. Oftentimes when you're talking to somebody that's that invested in that, and as Keri said, they're sorting through a file cabinet of things that they've had drilled into their head forever, whether or not they're true or not. That you're right, you can't have a proper conversation with them. In order to break that, you have to appeal or hit them at an emotional level first before you can turn the logic on. Because if you can't connect with them, like from that position of appealing to their emotion, you can't drill down on some of that. It's harder than concrete.
First of all, you don't discuss, you ask questions. Number one. Number two, if you can have humor, that's even better. So if you're
that's why they're trying to get rid of humor, Paul.
Yeah.
And common ground. That's the other thing they don't want.
And the thing is, if you're talking to someone who says that they don't like the idea of women staying at home having babies, and that is old style, patriarchal, then you go, well, how come you've got this picture of two individuals, both of them who look like men, but one is suckling a baby and clearly had a baby? That's okay.
Because how come
how come you're cheering this group of people staying at home having a baby, but not particularly happy with the normal patriarchal image? Not that I'm against women working. I've got nothing against it, but there seems to be this gut reaction from a group of people saying, I've had it.
Well, they have something against women not working. That's the thing.
That's my point.
Yeah, in a way, they do. And so there's sort of this idea that I think was pushed around where woke was at when I was younger. A lot of it, some of it was focused around women's issues. Then it became more focused around the race stuff, the critical race theory stuff, then the queer theory stuff. It kind of moves through all these different identity groups. Mm-hmm. But with the women's stuff, if you look at studies of women from the 1950s onwards, and these are studies where women self-report our levels of contentment and joy and happiness, it's declined a lot in the past couple of decades. And I would argue that's because it's not because women don't enjoy working. I enjoy working. It's just because now what we did is we created, it sort of became the norm that you have to have two people working in a household in order to survive, because we doubled the workforce. And so now you've got all these women who are trying to do both and balance both, and you can do everything. And then there are women who are finding out, you know what? I enjoy being able to work if I want to, but I actually enjoy more, maybe taking care of the home or taking care of kids and
Heretic.
Yeah, but the feminist part of social justice doesn't like to hear that. It's so they don't like women to have choices.
So maybe you can, because you're the representative woman on this, and you represent all women, right?
No, I was not elected.
No. How come so many women on the left are anti-women? And I don't want to, I'm trying to be careful in choosing my words, because Andre doesn't want his channel to be
New.
Very new. Yeah.
You know, there's this, you know, when it comes to women's sports and that entire category that expands out from men in women's sports. How come there are so many women who are anti-women? I don't get it.
Well, because this is to use that analogy of Marxism again, it's about but being about identity and power. It's a belief system that says the best way to look at the world is as this continuing competition for power between these identity groups. And in every identity group, we can point to an oppressor and an oppressed, or they also say privileged and marginalized.
Right.
And so they're in the ideology, it is good to be in one of the oppressed or marginalized groups, because the ideology says when you get a bigger voice, right? If you're an oppressor, you need to sit down and shut up, right? You need to check your privilege, that kind of thing. And so, so necessarily, if you think about it, in a belief system, if this is the world you live in and this is what people believe, there are going to be more identity groups emerging, so that people can, and then in those identity groups, well, let's identify the oppressor and the oppressed. Like, this is why you see fat positivity being pulled into social justice. This is why you see mental health justice being pulled in as another identity category, and people in their Twitter profiles will put, you'll notice they have all their identity groups. Like, I am Black and trans and fat, and also I have depression. And, you know, it's like all the different ways in which they're oppressed. And
guess so why you're depressed.
Yeah.
Take
But trans is one of those. And so now there's this whole new identity group where they're trying to do the same thing. They say, well, in this category, there are cis people and there are trans people. Cis people are the oppressors, trans people are the oppressed. And so now if you're in that ideology in one way, it's like, think of it as a big tent and with lots of doors. I walked in the feminism door, but there's a CRT, a race door, there's a fat door, there's a mental health justice door, the queer door. If once you get in there, though, they say no one will be free until we're all free.
Right.
It's basically like, now that you're in, now you have to also, that's why they all talk about all these different identity issues. So if you're in there, you
can't be selective.
Right. So even if you came in through the women door, now you have to fight for this oppressed group, and so that's the way they present it, trans. And so you're expected to do that. And if you don't, and there was a split, there was a schism that happened. Some of the old school feminists, the third wave feminists, some of them in the second wave feminists, they now call them TERFs, which is meant to say that they are transphobic, they're trans exclusionary, when they're not necessarily. They just want to, if you have a sex segregated sport, they want to protect it as sex segregated. That's it. Those women are now cast out. Right. You know, you're heretics, because once you come in the tent, you're expected to be in the whole tent, not just like your issue. So I don't know. That was kind of rambling. I didn't mean to take over.
No, but there's it's called transactional analysis.
Well, and this is kind of where it comes back around to entertainment, because unlike you, Keri, I wasn't very active in politics, right? Like, it wasn't my daily life, but I found politics starting to encroach upon my daily life.
Into entertainment.
And until it was already, way past my front door on my television, exactly in my living room. And I'm like, wait a minute here. And my first taste of it was too at that same time in 2016 with Ghostbusters, when I first said something about it, and all of a sudden I started getting attacked. And I'm like, what? Wait, what is this? Why am I being called all these names? I'm not these things. Because I, like you, I grew up in a time where our whole idea of feminism and being, equality was just, you know what? You do you, you be you. You want to be with a man and you're a man? Cool. You want to be with a woman and you're with a woman? Cool. You don't know if you're a man or a woman? Cool. As long as you're not hurting anybody, fine by me. Most people felt that way, right? Same thing with women's rights. Most people felt like, yes, a woman should be allowed to work. They should be able to have the same opportunities as everybody else. I thought we got all past that. And then all of a sudden I'm being called a sexist and a racist. It's like, I don't even think I've ever had a racist thought in my life, let alone been called one before today. Now all of a sudden, just because of my opinion on a movie, I'm automatically
and you're all the things. They'll call you all the things. If they can say you're one ist, you're all the ists, right? Because you're not in the tent. You're either in the tent or you're not. So that's the way they view it. It's very black and white, very childlike way of, you know.
So that does kind of get us back around to the entertainment side of things, which you also worked in, like you said. So obviously, I'm sure that you saw that in your work as well, because like you just said, the last project you work on was woke as hell.
So. It's very bad in the UK for stand-up clubs, because the UK does not have the same history of outrageous stand-up and freedom that there is in the United States. I mean, I could imagine. I mean, I performed at the Improv. I've performed in LA, and the thing is, if you can't let the stand-ups get away with whatever it is that they need to get away with, you would be pillared. But not in the UK. In the UK, you've got people who aren't Ricky Gervais, do not have his power, and they want to talk about a subject that one person will complain about. That person would be banned from every single comedy club. It's a real tragedy.
I think it's changing, though. You think it's changing there? Because
yes,
people are sick of it. They want to laugh and have fun. And
Peter Boghossian was asked very recently. I don't know if you know who he is.
I just talked to him last week. Yes.
And someone asked him, do you think the tide is turning? And he said, in the United States, yes. Although my understanding is that the House or one of the parts of your government passed a bill saying that yes, parents can be not informed as to their child's sexual interest. That a bill has now been, whether it'll be shot down, but some strange bill.
So there are some states doing that. I wasn't aware of anything on the national level, but I know there are some states doing that. But I do think things are, in terms of entertainment, just to bring it back to entertainment.
Yes.
People are
sorry, Andre.
Ready to have fun and ready to laugh and ready to go to a movie or a TV show and not feel like they're being lectured to. And the reason you feel like you're being lectured to in a way is because you are. It's almost as if, imagine if any other religion was putting things into trying to moralize to you constantly. That's happened before. If you look back at the old Hollywood codes, and it was at the 20s and 30s, they would put stuff in there that,
it has. And that's a good point, Keri, because even the religious filmmakers and entertainment creators, they've finally realized we can't shove this shit down people's throats.
Yeah.
But they do have an audience for it, right? And they have a very large audience for it. So what have they done? They've found their audience. They play directly to their audience. They don't try to make anybody else go see it. But what will happen is once in a while, you'll get a Passion of the Christ, or you'll get something that will cross over because it does speak to more people than just that group. But
but you wouldn't have, like a Batman movie where he's like, have you considered Jesus? And you're like,
exactly,
it's Batman.
Exactly. But you're right. Like 20, 30, 40 years ago, they probably would have pushed something like that. But to where now, like I said, that specific group has realized, look, we're going about this the wrong way. We need to just focus on our specific group. And if we get lucky, things will work out that way. And they have. They've had a lot of successes. Just recently this year, I can't remember the name of it, but was it Jesus Revolution? Was another one that reached beyond that group. You'll have this every once in a while, but they don't force that, right? That's the difference. To where this is what I was going to ask you, and this will get us around to the whole Reedy Creek Disney business. When you were working on a lot of these projects, did you notice that they were starting to was there this push to put the politics in there? Was it a conscious effort?
Well, on the project I worked on, absolutely. And I don't know, but that was a unique case because I was an executive producer. My client, who was the star of the show, was woke. Also, the several of the writing staff, the young comedians, we were able to hire a lot of woke comics to write. And so we would literally, in the writer's room, we would be having arguments over, can you punch up? Or you have to punch up. You can't punch down. You can't tell a fat joke about Chris Christie because that's punching down about, that's fat phobic. And, meanwhile, there's Chris Rock, who's not woke, who's like, can we just be funny? Like, like, why does there have to be this argument about beliefs, So that was the ideology on my show was definitely more important than the jokes. But I think overall in entertainment, just stepping back from it and leaving that field and everything, watching it. Yeah, I think it's a similar case where you got a lot of woke people in the writer's room and they think it's really great to kind of infuse, let's get this one line in here. Speaking of Batman, I enjoyed the last one a lot. And then there was that one line about where Catwoman had to say, she just had to get it in there. Like, oh, it's a bunch of straight white men. And I'm like, oh, come on. But there's a writer that's specifically saying, let's put that in. And you just, I think though, they're starting to see that people are just tired of it. So
yeah, and that's what's going to happen. It's going to burn itself out. Now, the educational system is still cranking out woke kids. Mm-hmm. And part of the challenge too is in the past, this has been going on since the 70s, because that's when I was going to school. The difference was that as soon as you hit the job market, that kind of got that changed you. The difference now is that there's so many businesses that are acquiescing to the kids that are coming out of it and not changing them. Like
they're changing the workforce. Yeah.
Yeah. The workforce is changing the companies.
Right.
That's the problem. So now that old rule is gone, and Hollywood has been the worst for that. The tech community also really bad, really bad. So,
well, everyone, last thing I'll say about it, I know I'm taking a lot of time and culture keeps trying to say something, but everyone of my age group if you did get this stuff at college, indoctrinated in this in the late 90s, early 2000s, we went out into the workforce and took it with us. That's why.
Yep.
I had friends who went into journalism. I had friends who went to work at Google and Snapchat, into tech, friends in entertainment, people like me. And we were basically taught in university to become little activists, that we were taught what to think instead of how to think. And then we were sort of like, you need to go out into the world and spread this and change the world. And we had that activist mentality. So it's going to take a while to undo all of that.
And what kind of conversations have you had with the people who are part of your cohort?
You mean people who are still in it?
Yeah.
Woke? Oh, well, I think they're changing too. I've had friends. I have a friend who's an executive at Sony who has quietly behind the scenes had conversations with me and others I know who wants to, who's still afraid to say something publicly, but wants to figure out how to say things in the right way to help explain. And I'm like, just good luck, because no matter how you say it, no matter how you word it, they're going to treat you like an outcast if you come out and say.
That's a good thing though.
It's good though that person's.
But let's come back around to that actually, because that's a very interesting topic. But culture has to leave us because he has to go pick up comics.
Oh, culture.
Well, I actually have a different stop to make before that. Otherwise,
we'll have to let him run, and then we'll come back around to this because this is a very interesting topic indeed. But Warachi had one for culture and Chato. Before you leave, have sections of each. Mao Marx ideology combined and reskinned. That is, the shows currently are so bad. That's why they are. Sorry. They have tossed away old values that they don't think is good anymore or are good. Yeah. They have to make the old thing bad before they can insert the new thing. That's their problem.
Yeah, right? They're terrified of the individual. The individual, they don't want to have any kind of power.
So thank you for being here, Culture. Enjoy the rest of your vacation.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys for on Friday. I fully intend to be somewhat awake for that show. And it's good to see you again, Keri, and to all of you out there. Stay here because Keri's got great stories, and someday I'm going to interview her instead of her interviewing me.
I would love that. You guys have fun. I'm so envious.
Well, I think you're one of the best, and like I said, your background feeds right into the conversations at all points. Even if you're not very familiar with some of the IPs that we invest in. But thank you so much, Keri. And Paul, it's great to see you. It's nice to see you outside of your Canadian tuxedo. So thanks for going full lab coat with us. I'll see you guys later. Lots of love.
I see you. Bye. Bye, Culture.
So yes, I liked that question. That's a great question that was asked. So pick up where you just left off. I didn't mean to interrupt that whole thing because that's a great. So you had an executive at Sony who reached out to you and wanted to know how to navigate this stuff. Is kind of what you're talking about.
Oh,
that,
yeah.
I think can navigate us into the Disney discussion.
Well, they wanted to be able to write a post, kind of explaining, here's where I think some of the pitfalls are and where we're at with this, the way that we're treating each other and talking to each other, and the way that we talk about issues and put it in entertainment. And so I talked to this person for hours about it and about, I wrote something like that when I left woke. I wrote an essay called On Leaving the SJW Cult and Finding Myself. And it was sort of, my audience for that was my friends and colleagues, to help them understand what I was seeing and why I was leaving. And it's still, I still had a great unfriending. You're still going to have it. It doesn't matter how.
No, of course.
You pick your words. They're not, until enough people do that, that it takes a lot of people, which I think we're starting to see, though. A lot of people are starting to use their voice and say, hey, I don't agree with all this stuff. And I'm a liberal. There are liberals who are like finally coming out and saying, this is not liberal. And the more people that do that, I think the culture will change. But just be prepared. You know, what I was saying to this friend is, yeah, you probably will be ostracized. I don't think you can pick any magic words where you're not gonna have some type of fallout or unfriending where people say
you will lose a ton of obvious support. I have, especially in the Canadian entertainment industry, which has always been extremely woke. But I get DM'd from people who say, I can't join your conversation, and I can't even hit the little heart on. I can't even Twitter heart you.
They're afraid to do that.
Completely afraid to do that, but they appreciate what I'm trying to be reasonable about it. And I'm a liberal. I'm a progressive. I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-trans. I'm just not pro-idiocy, and I'm not pro-cult. And that's part of the challenge, especially up here in Canada, because the government cultural agencies will never fund an outrageous comedy in English language, because that's just not going to happen. But again, you know, I'm also pro CBC, which goes against a whole bunch of conservatives up here. But you know, I think my arguments tend to be a bit too nuanced.
Well, I'm glad you, I was just going to let you mention that I'm glad you brought up basically being ostracized and losing friends, because that's another sign of the cult mentality. You have that in Scientology and literally every other cult ever. The moment that you leave, you are ostracized.
Correct.
Completely. And obviously you have the same thing here. Tom.
And you have to agree with everything. You cannot look at J.K. Rowling, who was a super ultra left feminist, and she transgressed the unwritten law, as they said in Monty Python. And I think I mentioned this before. When I was taking sociology, we did a test on transactional analysis, which is what this is. You go into a group of people, listen to what they're talking about, and they'll talk about one subject, and just and join them and just disagree a little bit. You will not be allowed to join the group. And the disagreement can be very, very tiny. And I did the experiment. I walked in, a bunch of guys were talking about how Dodge trucks were terrible. And I said, and I'm listening and everything else. And I didn't know these people. And I said, well, Dodge makes a couple of good models. Bang. Out. Not allowed to discuss with them. I was not their friends. I was not allowed to join in. I couldn't discuss further, just because of just talking about Dodge trucks. So
to be fair, though, Dodge kind of sucks.
Excuse me.
Kind of like Bud Light.
Anyways,
trucks,
the point is that no, I mean it's a great joke, and the point is that it does, any disagreement is verboten, and when you get into such an emotional group such as the cultural revolutionists, it just becomes worse.
Well, and this is where I was going to try and swing it back around to the whole conversation of Disney was